Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Daily Bolt with your host, Dr. Jeff Tilley. Today's topic: neither AOC nor President Trump distinguished themselves over Dorian. Sit back and relax and enjoy today's podcast. So, I didn't get a Dorian update podcast in yesterday, unfortunately, but there was certainly some Dorian news. Mostly Dorian followed the northeast coast of Florida, staying offshore anywhere from about 105 to about 90 miles offshore of the coast of Florida, up past Jacksonville, off the Georgia coast, before starting to make a turn more to the north and then to the north-northeast. As was expected, this is the recurvature that we've been talking about for several podcasts now, and normally happens with Atlantic hurricanes. As of 1 p.m. Today, September 5th, Dorian is about 55 miles east of Charleston, South Carolina, 125 miles south-southwest of Wilmington, North Carolina, and it continues to make a very slow turn to the northeast. It is moving about 20 degrees off of due north to the east. That's still a north-northeast direction. It is slowly starting to pick up speed, now moving at about 8 miles per hour. So it will make a closer approach to the northern South Carolina and southern North Carolina coasts. It may even come on shore over the over parts of the Outer Banks of North Carolina over the next 24 hours. But now that it is moving more rapidly, the impacts will not be as severe as were the case for the Bahamas, which will take quite some time to recover from having an almost 36-hour episode with Dorian on Grand Bahama Island. The Abacos, Dorian was stronger, but moved through the Abacos a bit faster. Grand Bahama has probably taken what will be the worst damage from Dorian, and not to discount what's going on in the Carolinas right now. There have been a few tornadoes in the Carolinas. Charleston has been flooded. As is often the case with hurricanes that make close approaches. This again is due to the storm surge of water coming on shore, largely ahead of the approach of the hurricane. There's also been quite a lot of rain in the Carolina coastal areas and some of the Georgia coast as well. There are still watches and warnings that continue, and the fact that Dorian's eye has expanded, and as expected, the area of hurricane force winds and tropical storm force winds has expanded. As of 1 o'clock, there are hurricane force winds being reported in the Charleston area. In the harbor, wind gusts of about 80 miles per hour have been reported in Charleston Harbor, and there are reports of gusts on other coastal stations exceeding 85 miles per hour. So there certainly is a lot to still happen with Dorian in the Carolinas over the next day or two. And so I don't want to minimize that. But compared to having 36 hours of a Category 4 then 3 hurricane lash you, this is certainly a bit better news than might have otherwise been the case. So now we get to the topic of this podcast, which is less on Dorian's track, which I've already talked about, but more on some of the hubbub over various statements made by various politicians concerning Dorian. And not unexpectedly, AOC has made statements, the president has made statements, and neither one of them are really batting too well with this. I'm going to start with the president's statement, actually. So, the president continues to double down on his earlier tweet where he claimed that, well, Alabama could be threatened. And to be fair, if you go back to forecasts from last week, longer range forecasts, yes, there were track solutions that would have taken the storm across the Florida Peninsula into the Gulf of Mexico and with some impacts to parts of Alabama. However, by the time Dorian reached the Bahamas, it was becoming increasingly clear that it was unlikely for a track to go much farther west than parts of Georgia. Southeast Georgia, East Georgia, before curving back and going through interior sections of South and North Carolina and Virginia. So it's not smart for him to continue insisting on this at this point. Why bother arguing something that was dealing with a forecast that was over 5 days ago? In fact, close to 6 days ago, if not even farther, in terms of getting significant impacts to Alabama. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make him look good. It makes it sound like he's not really been paying that much attention to what the National Weather Service has been putting out. And while there's a variety of tracks that get put out, there's a whole ensemble of models that go into hurricane track forecasting. Anything that would have suggested a track to significantly affect Alabama beyond, say, almost a week ago would have been most certainly an outlier track, and has certainly not verified and been anywhere close to correct. So he's not distinguishing himself in this particular area. AOC has not done a whole lot better, unfortunately. And if she wants to credibly talk about climate and climate change, she has to understand the science a little better than she apparently does. To say that climate change caused Dorian is an oversimplification and an overgeneralization at best. We do know from various climate change models and scenarios that there are warmer ocean temperatures. Warmer ocean temperatures lead to more severe hurricanes. As I've already talked about, however, on this podcast, one of the reasons that the ocean temperatures are as warm as they are, or were, actually, off the Bahamas and in the Gulf Stream is the fact that we have not really had a significant storm impact these areas this hurricane season. There was the very early subtropical storm, which is a hybrid between a tropical storm and an extratropical low. And in podcasts last year, I talked more about subtropical storms, and we can hit that topic again perhaps when it becomes relevant this season. But really, that subtropical storm was early enough in the season that it really didn't cause a significant impact onto any Atlantic, Caribbean Ocean temperatures. We've had a couple of other tropical storms in the Gulf of Mexico, in fact, a very short-lived one earlier in the week as well, which is already by itself not doing a whole lot of anything to be very noteworthy about. It's not even being tracked anymore by the National Hurricane Center. Those storms were relatively short-lived, and they affected Gulf of Mexico temperatures a little bit, but not the Western Atlantic and the Northwestern Caribbean to any sort of degree. The stalling of Dorian is due to a short-term juxtaposition of various weather systems. The fact that Dorian effectively stalled for almost 36 hours and lashed Grand Bahama Island as much as it did. That is not something that you can attribute to climate change. The phenomena are too short. So anything trying to tie Dorian to climate change, again, at best it's an oversimplification, it's an overgeneralization, and may well simply just be a complete overstatement, which has matched several other overstatements that AOC has made with respect to climate change and weather phenomena. It's going to take some degree of research to see just what, if any, degree of Dorian you might be able to attribute to climate change. I would personally say, based on what I've seen watching Dorian over the last week, that it's very little. It's much more a function of the fact The Dorian is occurring at this point in the season where there has not been any significant impact on surface and upper ocean temperatures by any tropical systems. Might the average ocean temperature be slightly higher now than it would be in any other year, say 20 years ago, with similar circumstances? Maybe. But that's a research question. We'll have to look at it. I would be surprised if the average ocean temperature is more than about 1 degree Fahrenheit higher than what you might have seen 20 years ago under similar circumstances with a storm with this track hitting these areas after no tropical storms had impacted them. I can't answer that question right now. It will take some research to do. Someone is probably researching it at the National Hurricane Center even as we speak. And we may find out something more about this. But to make a blanket statement without really having the facts behind it, sorry, that doesn't distinguish AOC either. So not a good week for either one. It also just reinforces the fact that if you don't really have the facts, be very careful what you say. That goes for politicians. That even goes for scientists. Don't go out on a limb just because you think it will make people believe your argument more, because ultimately the facts may not support you. That's all for today's edition of the Daily Bolt. I'm Dr. Jeff Tilley. Have a good rest of your day whenever you're listening to this, and God bless.